Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I will be discussing probably my favorite movie of 2025, and that's Superman 2025. Arguably, I'd say this is probably my favorite film for some time from Hollywood, what with the drought in content and the quality, story, and structure of how most films have been made post-COVID. Now, I've always had some preference for the MCU when I was much younger. However, we all know how much they've been sinking due to their lackluster disregard for the audience, producing and making constant projects nobody has asked for. Not to mention butchering and the ruining of certain IPs recently. I can't help but say WB isn't perfect either in regards to their past, within the Snyderverse and trying to compete with the MCU when all hasn't been established. However, luckily for them, it doesn't mean they stayed the same and did not take feedback from their films in audience or box office performance. Now, going back to the topic of the video, I will be discussing what is it that makes Superman 2025 such an amazing film, even bringing in the score, soundtrack, story, casting, and the hype and build-up for Superman, as well as to tackle with why people shouldn't dismiss it for certain biases or hate towards the people making it. As I say, let the work speak for itself. Now, when I make this video, I am being genuine that this movie should be recommended when being with friends or when you're bored. It's a film that's a must even for casuals or those that want to dive into a story. Now, a small history of the production of this movie is, upon hearing the planning and announcement for the new DCU under new CEOs, James Gunn and Peter Safran, many fans weren't on board with the idea of a reboot of the DC cinematic universe. Honestly, I was one of the original fans that was here since their release of the Man of Steel film back in summer of 2013, which hit well with fans, including normies who wouldn't think to watch it. However, this was an exception as you'd have to be living under a rock if you didn't know who Superman was. Superman being a highly recognized hero and name in itself alongside Batman or Spider-Man. Now comes why the film has become sort of hated and despised to the point that politics are involved, and I say, please don't bring politics as it can be really divisive, as that's what brings us comic fans together, finding appreciation in a type of art like films. Then comes the animosity individuals have had towards the universe as a whole, as some of those people are remnants who want the Snyderverse to continue, as many have become huge fans of Henry Cavill as Superman, seeing it as perfect casting for the Man of Steel. Literally, lol. Many have even gone to the point that you'd think they were a cult, as upon dismissal of Henry Cavill from the DC universe. Many blamed James Gunn for this, even hating or bashing him for supposedly ruining a good universe that could have been. Now, I'll go on to add factual statements and even viewer outlooks as to why this isn't the case, not to mention that James Gunn had to give in the position he was in. Going into the brief summary of the Snyderverse by director Zack Snyder, which began with his Man of Steel 2013 and ended with Aquaman 2 in 2023. You can't honestly tell me there was some sort of hope in saving or reviving this universe. While it began humbly with Man of Steel, financially speaking and audience-wise, the universe went spiraling down or up. As a follow-up to the Man of Steel was a movie called Batman vs. Superman. And guess what? Superman died in the end of that movie, this being the second film too. Yes, there were successes in Wonder Woman and even Aquaman, who wasn't a well-known League member like Flash or Batman. There was even the release of Shazam, a less-known hero. However, the energy of this movie is what I was reminded of when I watched Superman 2025. Still, you think the future for that universe was bright, given the lack of Superman in the years following Man of Steel. Justice League was released in 2017, and that movie was a disaster due to Joss Whedon have creative control after Zack Snyder left production due to a personal issue. The version released in theaters was a joke compared to what we would get years later in the Snyder Cut version of the Justice League. However, this movie was a 3-hour iteration, better version of the movie, 4 years after the one that was released in theaters. Then came the lack of vision for the universe, as you'd think with Superman creating hype in that movie, he was very underutilized years after with no actual plan as what followed, as many of the projects after it were underwhelming and didn't resonate with fans. Some glimmer of hope was the release of The Suicide Squad, directed by James Gunn, which was a sequel to the first Suicide Squad and resonated better with fans than the first. The heads at WB saw potential in Gunn to the point he was brought back again to do the Peacemaker series based off of a villain. Once again, this resonated with fans as it performed well in their streaming service, HBO Max. Then came the last straw for the DCEU with the release of Black Adam, an anti-hero movie starring The Rock, which underperformed and not what the studios was looking for. This was the nail in the coffin, which set the immediate hiring of James Gunn, one of the golden boys for the MCU, producing one of their best-named films in the Guardians of the Galaxy. Then came the backlash, or hate towards him and this new universe, as he was received negatively due to him firing Henry Cavill, who seemingly was going to make a return to the DCEU after he made a cameo in the post-credits scene of Black Adam. I view this highly unfair, as not only was Henry Cavill was underutilized since his first standalone film in 2013, the universe seemingly had a messy plan, with their universe trying to rush with the already established MCU. It was also reported that The Rock went behind creators' backs to bring in Henry Cavill without official approval, even including executives as Dwayne Johnson did this on his own accord, wanting to establish his own universe or having Superman and Black Adam be rivals, which I find very amusing. James Gunn had no alternative but to dismiss Henry Cavill due to creative differences. Henry was part of the universe that has been long gone, and the situation that Gunn was in with his own universe, not to mention the mess Johnson and the DCEU left behind. Also, including if you bring back an actor from said flopping universe to a new one, it would be confusing to audiences to see the same actor playing the same character, however, with a different cast of characters. Following this, regardless, I was still excited to see a Superman film for the first time in over a decade, and it had high hopes with this universe given the announcement of projects and creative idealism of Gunn. Now, shift into a year. We're in 2024 and it's spring. We get our first looks for Superman with actor David Corenswet for the role of Clark Kent/Superman. Then came the release of images for the Superman, which looked fun and closer to what is seen in the comics, as he now has the red trunks, which the former Superman lacked. The S was based off of Kingdom Come Superman in the comics, which set it apart from the other S's. Reactions to this were semi-split, however mostly positive, as people saw David Corenswet's appearance as similar to Henry Cavill. So, another perfect casting already. Then came the castings of Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, Skylar Gisondo as Jimmy Olsen, and Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. Now we have characters who are part of Superman's circle in motion. Later in the year, late 2024, we finally get a trailer. Now when I first see this trailer, let me tell you, it's a breath of fresh air for movies I have seen in a while, which included DC movies. The trailer gave off friendly, optimistic, hopeful vibes, which is to be expected of the Superman character who projects energy of a Christ figure. This vaguely reflected what was shown with Henry Cavill's Superman, with people calling him God being recognized as the most powerful man on the planet. I showed this trailer to my own sibling who has his own affinity for films, and upon hearing this was a Superman trailer and the energy gave off this, piqued his interest. Now, I don't speak for everyone, but I can say this movie was on my must-watch for 2025. Shifting to spring of 2025, and we get a teaser. However, this time it was a bit divisive, as a notable part of the teaser that stood out was Superman being beaten up, and on top of that was his dog Krypto, also Superdog, jumping on him, whacking him repeatedly while agonizing in pain. People saw issues with this, as they saw this as a take of Superman being depicted as weak or a whiner, if you think that's possible, as they pointed out his wheezing. Then came the final trailer, which shifted the tone positively again in conjunction with the score, giving a hopeful and heroic energy. There have been critiques and critical fans trying to point out what will go wrong with movies, and that was a group of people still devoted to the Snyderverse, to the point a subreddit post made to spoil the movie as the movie was to be released a couple weeks early for early screenings. They even posted their plan, which included reserving tickets and not paying, occupying space, and even posting spoilers everywhere on social media. This was very prominent as people despised James Gunn for firing Henry Cavill. However, it's shown by Henry Cavill that there was no hard feelings with him not returning and looking forward to other ventures. Zack Snyder himself is friends with James Gunn and wished the best for the film. However, supposed fans either didn't care or ignored it entirely to just bash the film because it's not part of the Snyderverse. This didn't slow sales as I saw it early on a Thursday, and the theater was packed within minutes. I must say the way the beginning was choreographed, and the usage of the score, which was jointly composed by John Murphy and David Fleming, with John Williams' iconic 1978 theme from Superman 1978 incorporated into the film's music, gave it an amazing start, giving homey and family-friendly energy. In contrast to the Man of Steel, which was broody or dark, while yes, the fights, as awesome as they are, a Superman that was too serious didn't sit well in audiences. Same goes for the tone of the film, which had deaths including John Kent, Clark Kent's adoptive father. This is something even die-hard fans can agree was too much. Now, there are two key messages and takes that Henry Cavill's Superman brings out, which I didn't like, and this included a ratio of the base as well, and that was him killing the villain of the film Zod by brutally snapping his neck, which is something Superman in the comics has rarely done, even for justified reasons. Then comes Batman vs. Superman, where Superman makes a statement which I don't think is a good display, and that was, "No one stays good in this world." When one comes across this line or thinks of it, you'd think this is coming from an anti-hero or dark character who turned towards a dark take of justice, sort of like Batman or Wolverine. But this is coming from Superman, the hero known as the Blue Boy Scout of truth and justice. For him to say this was a disrespect to the character and not an accurate take of what the character is supposed to be. Note, children who are part of the audience watch this, and this wasn't exactly a good message to have your Blue Boy Scout relay this message. In contrast to Superman 2025, as the film progressed, you not only get the polar opposite of the character's dark tone in Man of Steel, but a close depiction to what the hero should be. The comedy being from James Gunn himself, which is an edgy, modern, corny vibe, made it fun and enjoyable. By now, most fans who have seen The Man of Steel are older, including myself, and this also brings in a new audience in younger viewers. You'd want to bring in viewers by appealing to a family or young prospective viewer. That's exactly what this film did, and that was making this movie seem like a live-action cartoon, which is a pivotal part as to why people get into superheroes aside from comics. We also have the romantic aspect of the movie with Clark Kent and Lois Lane, whose relationship is well known to be on a level similar to Peter Parker with Gwen Stacy, which this film depicted well. When watching this film, there's no extreme origin film as this has been done before. However, Superman isn't exactly experienced in hardships of being a hero similar to Cavill's. When creating a new universe, this is one of the things James Gunn did right, and that was to set the audience to an already established hero world. This can be contrasted to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, as he's already Spider-Man by the time he's introduced, however, still a rookie in regards of a hero. An ongoing theme and message I love about this movie is literally no matter how beaten or thrown to the ground Superman gets, he always gets up or gets through no matter the circumstances. As shown when it's revealed that he was actually sent to Earth by his parents to take over Earth and have the world turn on him after that. Then comes the situation where he was locked up in Luthor's dimensional jail and having the odds against him as he's depowered, essentially making him weak. Regardless, he still uses his powers for the greater good to save Metamorpho's son and Metamorpho himself. Once again, despite the conflicts of the movie, it gave me hopeful vibes with Superman always getting back and going through any situation. Note, even though Superman is always seen as all-powerful, it doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't need help, as fans saw this as an issue which I find appalling, as not only was this a good message that everyone always needs help, this included even superpowered beings as well. Issues people have with this film is due to how many times Superman is beaten. However, this can be countered as the beginning of the film states that Superman has never lost a fight prior to his first scene in the movie, and that was because of Lex Luthor fighting him over the years. James Gunn has even said that this is Superman's earlier years, as he's still young and not as established as Henry's Superman yet. Then comes those minor scenes which people like to ignore, such as fighting Stitch's cousin in Metropolis. LOL. In the process, not only is he fighting, but keeping it to a minimum as he saves civilians on the side. He even goes as far as to save a squirrel, which I found wholesome, as it's scenes like this that shows you what the character is all about. This Superman was really something else when it came to heart, as going back again, despite him being labeled as a villain by Lex, he does the right thing, and that's by helping people who needs it. As a conflict that's brought into movie is when two countries are about to engage in a war. His good deeds don't go unnoticed as they far outshine the acclaimed allegations set against him, bringing him to take the mantle again to help the needy. Then there's the scenes with Ma and Pa Kent showing Superman's humane side, as after finding out his origins, another key message which I love is the decisions you now make define who you are, not what others tell, and not what you're depicted to be. Which is another warm tone to the film. This really contrasted with Gunn's other projects in the Guardians of the Galaxy, as family is what holds a person together, and one is never truly alone in dark moments like this. It's only finding Solstice in love with a family that brings the character stronger together, as despite being repeatedly thrown, Superman gets back into the fight. Another key shot is when Lex's dimensional hole starts tearing the world apart, causing havoc in Metropolis. Superman's biggest act was saving a woman from a falling building. I'll admit this had me a bit in tears with him coming on top of that building, and the score being played, depicting him as a Christ or Savior figure, which is what the character is about. Finally is David Corenswet's greatest performance and probably the best acting in what I've seen in years is Superman's message against Luthor, who tries to kill him the entirety of the film. And instead of anger or some form of violence, he confronts him on a human and personal level. The speech he gives is, "That is where you've always been wrong about me, Lex. I am as human as anyone. I love, I get scared. I wake up every morning, and despite not knowing what to do, I put one foot in front of the other, and I try to make the best choices that I can. I screw up all the time, but that is being human, and that's my greatest strength. And someday, I hope, for the sake of the world, you understand that it's yours too." Wow. After that, this hit me once again with emotions, with me tearing a bit. With this amazing performance which captures the character true to heart, this film accurately depicts who Superman is. Really, the soundtrack in this music and how the characters were portrayed, specifically David Corenswet as Superman, is really well done and perfecting casting of the character in today's times. I'd even go on to say David Corenswet could be the second coming of Christopher Reeves, who to this day is the best Superman. I recommend giving Superman 2025 a watch as it's a fun, live-action, warm, friendly film that audiences of all ages can watch. Let me know what you guys think of this video. Share this video, comment, and like. Have a nice day.